Temperatures drop this low, there's a good chance you could come across a cold-stunned iguana. Wildlife officials say that they are getting reports and sightings all across the area, and they're asking people who find them to bring them to them for proper handling.
Florida just experienced a wildlife emergency so severe it left even seasoned biologists speechless, and all of it was caught on camera. In early February 2026, an Arctic cold snap, the worst in decades, tore through the Sunshine State. And what it did to the animals was devastating. Thousands of iguanas frozen mid-grip, dropping from trees like green hail across entire neighborhoods. Dead sharks, stingrays, and eels washing up on beaches from Marco Island to Sanibel. Hundreds of sea turtles floating motionless in water, too cold for their organs to function. And more than 900 manatees crammed into a single warm spring, fleeing water that had turned deadly. The footage spread fast, but every new clip that surfaced only revealed something worse than the last. This wasn't just unusual weather. This was a full-scale ecological disaster unfolding in real time. And what scientists discovered in the aftermath might be the most disturbing part of the entire story. The cold that shouldn't have happened. Here's the thing about Florida. It doesn't do cold. The entire state, its infrastructure, its agriculture, its ecosystems, is built around the assumption that winter means mild.
Starting to come together. It's another little piece of upper level energy that's going to charge this storm system up as it moves off towards the east and then gets pulled northward tonight. And as that's happening, that's going to do two things. It's going to pull moisture back towards the eastern side of the peninsula. Then when it starts pulling away, it's going to bring moisture off of the Gulf back towards the western side of the peninsula and bring in a lot of wind and a lot of cold air.
So, when a powerful Arctic high-pressure system parked itself over the southeast and shoved a wall of frigid air deep into the Florida peninsula at the end of January 2026, nothing was ready. By early Sunday, February 1st, snow flurries were falling at airports in Jacksonville, Tallahassee, and Marianna. Residents along the Gulf Coast north of Tampa reported light snow in Hernando and Citrus counties. Hard freeze warnings blanketed the state. Farmers scrambled to protect berry, peach, and citrus crops. At Southern Hill Farms in Claremont, overhead irrigation was applied to coat plants in a protective shell of ice, a desperate technique to keep the fruit alive underneath. And get this, icicles formed on the Universal Orlando Globe in central Florida. That's how far south the freeze reached. Miami hit 35 degrees Fahrenheit that weekend, shattering a daily record that had stood since 1909. West Palm Beach plunged to 30, its coldest reading in roughly 36 years. AccuWeather meteorologists called it one of the most intense cold outbreaks Florida had experienced in decades.
Of our XRAD radar system, as rare snow could make winter weather history in Florida and Georgia this weekend as crews already beginning to prepare.
The FWC warned it could rival the brutal 2010 freeze, an event that caused widespread wildlife mortality across the state. But temperature records were the least of it, because what this cold was doing to living things across Florida was about to become impossible to ignore. Green rain. It started with the trees. Across South Florida, Miami Beach, Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, residents woke up to something that looked like the aftermath of a bizarre natural disaster. Green iguanas, some 3, 4, even 5 feet long, were dropping from branches and landing on sidewalks, in courtyards, across car hoods, and in people's front yards. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Stiff, eyes open, completely motionless. Some people thought they were dead. They weren't. Not yet. Here's what was happening inside their bodies. Green iguanas are cold-blooded. They depend entirely on outside heat to regulate every function, from heartbeat to muscle control. When temperatures drop below roughly 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, their systems enter a state called torpor. Metabolism flatlines. Muscles go limp. They lose all grip and fall from whatever they're clinging to. The footage was surreal. Motionless green lizards scattered across neighborhoods like debris from some kind of reptile apocalypse. Social media exploded. News crews captured it from coast to coast. Now, pay attention to this. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission saw this chaos as a rare opportunity. On January 30th, they issued Executive Order 26-03, temporarily allowing the public to collect cold-stunned green iguanas without a permit. For 2 days, February 1st and 2nd, anyone could. Bag the immobilized reptiles in sealed cloth sacks inside locked containers labeled Prohibited Reptiles and deliver them to FWC drop-off locations. Blake Wilkins has been trapping iguanas professionally for over a decade with redline iguana removal. He's handled cold stun events before. But when he pulled up to his first collection site that Sunday morning and saw the sheer volume of motionless green bodies carpeting the ground, even he paused. The sheer numbers of them was surprising, he told reporters. And this is a man who does this for a living. By the time the 2-day window closed, over 5,195 iguanas had been turned in across South Florida. On Sunday alone, roughly 600 were dropped off. By Monday at 1 p.m., another 350 plus had come in, including 140 collected by the Palm Beach County Parks and Recreation team.
FWC did allow for people to go to a place today. If you find frozen iguanas in your yard, you can look up on FWC's website and they'll tell you drop-off points where they will humanely put iguanas down and make sure that they don't suffer, but we also get them out of our environment and save South Florida.
It was the first organized large-scale iguana removal during a cold stun event in Florida's history. The FWC transferred live iguanas to permitted dealers when possible. The rest were humanely euthanized, because under Florida law, green iguanas are a prohibited species that cannot be released back into the wild. They damage seawalls, burrow under foundations, destroy native vegetation, and reproduce rapidly. Adults reach 6 feet long, and the FWC had to keep repeating one warning: do not bring cold-stunned iguanas inside your home, because as temperatures rise, these animals come back to life fast. And when they wake up disoriented and trapped, they react with sharp teeth, razor claws, and tail whips powerful enough to leave bruises. Now, if you're watching this and you're not yet subscribed, this is exactly the kind of story we cover every week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, because the iguanas falling from the sky were just the opening act. What was happening beneath Florida's water that same weekend was far more alarming. 900 manatees, one spring. While the world was watching frozen iguanas go viral, something far more urgent was unfolding underwater. Florida manatees looked like they could handle anything. Massive, slow, seemingly indestructible. But here's the catch. Despite their size, manatees have a surprisingly thin layer of blubber compared to other marine mammals. They are tropical animals, completely dependent on warm water to survive. The FWC states that manatees need water warmer than 68 degrees Fahrenheit to endure prolonged cold. Drop below that threshold, and a condition called cold stress sets in, the manatee equivalent of hypothermia. It slows digestion, it impairs organ function, and if exposure continues too long, it kills. So, when the cold hit, manatees across Florida did the only thing they could: they ran. They packed into natural freshwater springs and power plant warm water discharge areas. Any pocket of water that stayed above survival temperature. And the scale of the migration at one park in particular left officials stunned. At Blue Springs State Park in Orange City, staff counted more than 900 manatees crammed into the 72-degree spring water. Think about that for a second. Less than a week earlier, that same park had reported fewer than 70. That's a surge of more than 1,200%. 900 animals packed into a single refuge because every surrounding body of water had become too cold to live in. Michelle Pasowich, the administrator of FWC's Manatee Management Program, didn't sugarcoat the stakes.
This cold snap that is upon us and that is going to be here for a minute. It's going to be like that family member who just won't leave.
They start to get irritating after 3 days. They say like fish and family members should never stay around longer than 3 days.
Florida manatees are very dependent on environmental factors to survive, especially during the winter season, she told reporters. If manatees are exposed to water less than 60 degrees for prolonged periods of time, they can experience what we refer to as cold stress, which is similar to hypothermia in humans. And just like hypothermia, it can be fatal. On January 29th, trained FWC experts pulled 2 young manatees from Bear Creek in St. Petersburg, both showing visible cold stress lesions despite being at a healthy weight. They were rushed to the Moat Marine Laboratory for rehabilitation. FWC rescue teams fanned out along the Gulf Coast. Near the Cape Canaveral Energy Center, authorities established a no-entry zone, banning all boat traffic near the warm water area, where manatees were huddling. Because if a startled manatee flees a warm refuge into cold water, that displacement alone can be a death sentence. Kelly Richmond, spokeswoman for the FWC's Fish and Wildlife Research Institute, confirmed several cold stress-related manatee deaths had already been documented, but she added something that made the waiting worse. There is usually a 2-week delay in rise in mortality, if any, after such events, she wrote. The real toll wouldn't be known for weeks. There was a thin thread of hope. Since 2023, seagrass in the Indian River Lagoon has been recovering, putting manatees in better nutritional condition than during the devastating unusual mortality event of 2020. But extreme cold doesn't care how healthy you are if the warm water runs out. And here's the part nobody was talking about. While the world watched manatees flee for their lives, something catastrophic was happening to animals that couldn't run, couldn't fly, and had nowhere to go. The turtles couldn't escape. When water temperatures drop to 50 degrees Fahrenheit or below, sea turtles become cold stunned. Their body temperature crashes with the water around them. They go lethargic, then limp. Then they lose the ability to swim entirely. They float helplessly at the surface or wash ashore, motionless, looking dead. Most of them are still alive, barely. During this cold snap, the rescue numbers were unlike anything Florida had ever recorded. In the Panhandle alone, teams from the Gulf Specimen Marine Lab, the Florida Panhandle Marine Institute, the FWC, and the United States Geological Survey pulled 600 cold-stunned sea turtles from the water in roughly 1 week. 600 turtles, one region. Hunter Eichler, rescue and rehab coordinator at the Gulf Specimen Marine Lab in Panacea, had dealt with cold stun events before. But when more than 300 turtles arrived at his facility in a single day, Monday, February 2nd, the scene looked like a field hospital after a disaster. Turtles on every available surface, staff scrambling to intake, measure, and assess each animal. This is definitely the largest that Gulf Specimen Marine Lab has ever dealt with, Eichler said. We've never seen numbers like this. Because sea turtles are reptiles, they don't really function when the water temperature gets below 50, he explained. Usually sea turtles can swim out to deeper, warmer waters, but these sea turtles are trapped in the bay. The lab placed each turtle in water warm to about 60 degrees and monitored their recovery, checking breathing, testing swim strength, before clearing anyone for release. But it gets worse. Over 200 additional turtles were rescued across Central Florida and Tampa Bay, areas that rarely see cold stun events at all. SeaWorld Orlando's team pulled 16 green sea turtles from Titusville in Brevard County, some with visible cold stress damage on their shells, and down in the Florida Keys, where the water is supposed to be too warm for this to happen. The Turtle Hospital in Marathon was treating juvenile greens found floating, barely alive. Manager Bette Zirkelbach couldn't believe what she was seeing. Here at the Turtle Hospital, we're used to receiving cold-stunned turtles from New England, she said, but it's very rare to get a cold-stunned turtle from the warm waters in the Florida Keys. The Keys National Weather Service confirmed the region hadn't experienced cold like this since 2010. Lauren Albritton, stranding coordinator for the Florida Panhandle Marine Institute, described what cold stunning actually does to a turtle's body. And it's worse than you'd think. Their body temperature drops. They are not able to maintain their full function. They sort of end up floating and drifting to shore, which can cause further injuries. And if they're cold stunned for too long, they can actually have organ failure if we're not able to rescue them. Organ failure from cold water in Florida. Then on Wednesday, February 5th, something happened that gave the whole state a reason to exhale. Marine and wildlife teams carried out the largest sea turtle release in the region's history at Cape San Blas in Gulf County. Nearly 200 rehabilitated turtles, each tagged for future tracking, were carried one by one down the rainy beach to the water's edge. Volunteers and spectators lined the shore in silence. One by one, flippers found traction in the wet sand. One by one, the turtles crawled toward the surf, and as the first wave took them, the crowd erupted. Spectator Judy Lucas watched them disappear into the Gulf. "It's great to see them release 200, she said. "Amazing." But while the turtles were being saved, the coastline itself was telling a very different story. The ocean gives back what the cold took from Marco Island to Sanibel. The beaches of southwest Florida looked like a graveyard. Gulf water temperatures had plunged into the low 50s, and the ocean was surrendering what the cold had killed. Dead stingrays lay belly up in the shallows. Sea stars littered the tide line. Eels, crabs, and fish of every size covered the sand in numbers that shocked even people who had lived on these beaches for decades. And among the casualties that Tuesday, at least 3 sharks, one of them roughly 2 feet long, motionless on the sand at Tarpon Beach on Sanibel Island. Chris Oberg, a tourist from Minnesota out for a morning run, found it. She'd never seen anything like it. "It is really cool looking," she said. "I've never seen one like that, not on a beach." Dr. Rick Bartleson, a marine research scientist with the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation, was already on the ground. "Some of them are dead. Some of them have just slowed down and get washed up because they can't get the oxygen they need," he said. "They still need to be in the water for their bodies to keep processing that oxygen." The hardest hit species, Bartleson explained, were invertebrates and bottom dwellers in the shallows, where temperatures dropped fastest. Warm water fish like snook were especially vulnerable. And then he said something that stopped me cold. "In 2010, we had a major fish kill when water temperatures fell below 50 degrees. That event affected certain populations for years. Years, not weeks, not months. The FWC had warned ahead of the cold snap that prolonged cold could devastate both native and non-native aquatic species, naming tilapia, Mayan cichlids, sailfin catfish, bass, snook, and tarpon as vulnerable. They urged the public to report all fish kills so scientists could track the damage. Whether this event would rival the devastating 2010 kill, no one could say yet. Now, pay attention to this next part, because this is where the story takes a turn that should genuinely unsettle you. The terrifying twist. Everything you've heard so far, the frozen iguanas, the desperate manatees, the cold-stunned turtles, the dead sharks on the sand, all of it is devastating. But there's a deeper layer to this story that scientists are only now beginning to understand, and it changes everything. What if cold snaps like this one aren't just killing invasive species? What if they're making them stronger? James Stroud is a researcher at Georgia Tech who studies how invasive lizard populations in Florida respond to extreme cold events. His findings are alarming. After studying cold snap survivors, Stroud discovered that iguana populations showed measurably increased cold tolerance after previous freeze events. Before exposure to extreme cold, iguanas in his study became cold-stunned at around 46 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. After surviving a cold snap, that threshold dropped to approximately 42 degrees. The survivors could handle temperatures that would have shut their bodies down just months earlier. Think about that for a second. Every cold snap that kills the weakest iguanas is simultaneously selecting for the ones that can take more punishment. Generation after generation, survivors pass those traits on. The cold isn't eliminating them, it's training them. Blake Wilkins, the veteran trapper, sensed it without the data. They're going to reproduce and they're going to pass that behavior on to offspring, he warned. So it could potentially cause a bigger issue in the future if you don't stay on it. And get this, it's not just iguanas. The Burmese python, which has already caused an ecological catastrophe in the Everglades, driving population declines of 99% for raccoons, nearly 99% for opossums, and 87.5% for bobcats since 1997, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, may be undergoing the same kind of adaptation. USGS research shows that evolutionary changes have already altered parts of the python genome responsible for cold tolerance. And pythons have been observed using animal burrows to ride out freeze events, where underground temperatures stay far warmer than the surface. Governor DeSantis posted on social media that freezing temperatures are lethal for Burmese pythons and anticipated significant mortality if the temps go low enough. But Ian Bartoszek, environmental science coordinator for the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, was more measured. Freezing temperatures can be lethal to pythons, he acknowledged, but noted the snakes appear to be adjusting to Florida's occasional cold snaps. Here's the terrifying implication. Florida hosts more than 600 non-native species, 139 of them established and breeding in the wild, according to the University of Florida's Invasive Species Institute. Green iguanas, Burmese pythons, Argentine tagus, Nile monitor lizards, and hundreds more. Every time a cold snap tears through the state, it kills the weakest. And it lets the strongest, most cold-resistant individuals survive, breed, and pass on exactly the traits that made them harder to kill. A few days of extreme cold won't undo decades of ecological invasion, but it might be doing something far worse, accelerating the evolution of invasive species that are more resilient, more adaptive, and better equipped for a climate that grows more unpredictable every year. What Florida isn't ready for. Over 5,000 iguanas collected in 2 days, more than 900 manatees packed into a single spring, 600 sea turtles rescued in the Panhandle alone, the most ever recorded. Sharks, stingrays, and fish washing up dead across the entire southwest coast. Manatee deaths confirmed, with the full toll still weeks from being known. What happened in Florida in early February 2026 wasn't just a cold snap, it was a stress test. And the state's ecosystems are still waiting for the results. Kelly Richmond said Droude's research suggests that every freeze event might be quietly selecting for tougher, more cold-resistant invasive species, organisms that weren't supposed to survive here in the first place and are now evolving to stay. The viral iguana videos will fade, the headlines will move on, but the ecological consequences of what happened across Florida that first week of February, from the treetops to the ocean floor, could ripple through these ecosystems for years in ways no one fully understands yet. If this story changed the way you see Florida's wildlife, subscribe and tell me in the comments, what part of this disturbed you the most? The 900 manatees in one spring, the turtles with organ failure in the Keys, or the idea that every cold snap might be breeding something we eyes can't control? Because that last question is the one nobody has a good answer for, and that should unsettle all of us.